We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Biblical Hitmen, folks. My name's Stephen, host of the show. Today we've got Jamie Walden in the studio, but let's take care of business first. Folks, if you want to support the show, the best way to do it is to head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/The Biblical Hitmen. When you're there, you can get ad-free content, early access, and community chats, and all of that stuff. People are probably like, what? He's got a Patreon now? Yeah, just started it. Just got it up and rolling. So we started from the bottom, and we will get there. But folks, you could also support the show on YouTube, audio platforms. While you're there, subscribe, follow, like, share, comment on all the things. Leave a review, a good one if you can. And check the show out on social medias. But to the guest, Jamie Walden, welcome back, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, bro. I'm just amazed at your tech guru-ness. I'm lucky that I can log in to get on somebody else's show and they host me on a show or whatever. I'm like, I have no clue how to navigate any of that stuff, man.
You know what's crazy, man, is navigating all that kind of stuff. Well, I got a Mac now. I got the Mac Mini, which brought a whole new perspective of electronics and all this. And it really is like interconnectedness and doing things that you can put your mind to do. And
so you are the B system. I get it. I'm always like, no, people are always like, why don't you do shorts? Why don't you do whatever? Why don't you? And I'm like, dude, I'm 250 emails behind. Like, there's no way. Like, I would love to, you know. I think the information is important, especially with regards to the magnification of Christ and the strengthening of the saints. Like, I'm like, yeah, I would love to get the message out there, but ain't nobody got time for that. You know, I don't know how people have time for that. I'm like, I work 3 full-time jobs, for lack of a better word, and it's just not happening. So speaking of jobs, what's your guys' shift again? You said you just got off duty. Are you 24/48s?
Yeah, 24/48s. I just got off this morning. We had a clean night, no calls throughout the night.
What?
We actually
you must not be running ambulances on your department.
No, we do. We got ambulances,
no kidding,
man. Yeah. And so, well, for the people that are new, may not be familiar with you and familiar with the context of the conversation, just tell us a little bit of your background, credentials, what you've been involved in, and we'll move right into the topic.
Oh, my background, yeah. Marine. We're talking fire department language for listeners out there that aren't familiar with what are they throwing around, but yeah, we're talking fire department. So I have a background as in the Marine Corps Infantry, Sergeant in the Marine Corps Infantry, degree in history and law enforcement, justice administration. Worked a little bit just interning with the U.S. Marshals for a short time. They went on a hiring freeze, so I ended up having to jump on a local PD. So I was a city cop for a hot minute before switching back over, going to get my paramedic and becoming a firefighter paramedic. So within that context of that career, that's kind of my longest professional, career was as a firefighter paramedic. I was on the, deployable tech rescue team, hazmat technician, paramedic specialist. I did some tactical EMS in a contract role, and then disaster response globally out from those different career sets. So yeah, that's kind of my background.
No, I love it, man. Love it. And where can the folks support you? Where can they check out your content and all that?
They can just, like I was just saying, I'm like legitimately handicapped when it comes to being technologically declined. So they can just find me on YouTube and under Jamie Walden. I have a landing page at omegadynamics.org if anybody's ever wanting to reach out or ask questions or whatever. Again, I'm going to be super slow getting back to you. I apologize to everybody. I hate it. It's an impossibility with the workload that I maintain. And then, I just have like little social media, like Instagram page or whatever, but I don't even know how to use Instagram. I'm like, how do you share stuff? I don't get it. So I'm literally like, I'm still just an OG grunt that wants to eat crayons, and have a big dip in my lip and wear Velcro and, just go breach doors. Like that's kind of still how I just function, so.
Have all the tactical pockets everywhere. You got pens,
exactly. Velcro and dip, man. That's all you need and you're good to go. So yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we had an extrication yesterday, which is pretty much like the vehicle accident is so bad that we have to remove the car from entrapping the patient and stuff. And what's crazy too is you'll see people on the sidewalks. You'll see, just pedestrians walking, and the first thing that they really do is go to their phone, maybe videotape
It's
it or
disgusting.
record it.
Yeah.
Now what's crazy is they flew the bird in. The bird came. I set up a landing zone for the bird, and I caught myself, just getting footage of the bird, and I was like, this isn't right. And I was like looking at the scene, which is probably 100 yards away. And I'm like, someone's hurting over here. Someone's going through the worst time of their life, probably the worst experience they've ever been through. And so I huddled the guys up together, my crew that's on my truck, and we just prayed. I didn't really care about the difference in religious perspectives or whatever, which it's a blessing that we all have the same views.
Well, that's cool. Are you on an engine company?
I'm on an engine, yeah. So we
And you
prayed,
guys are
man.
all
We prayed for
believers?
them, and
That's
yeah,
awesome, man. That's
yeah.
cool.
And it was just just it's a movement. It's starting to kind of come out of Babylon and seek the Lord and put Him over every little thing that you really do in your life. And you just got done doing a great episode on Prometheus Lens with Doc Brown, and that episode was moving. But I'd like to get into the chaotic events that are taking place. Prophecy, a lot of action is on the table. World War III and all of this, man. Where do you see where we're at with all this?
Yeah, it's a big deal, and it is hard to even know where to break into it because it is so prescient and also ubiquitous right now. Like it really is. Whether people want to agree with this or not, and there's always going to be the trollers out there that will, well, I disagree with you. I personally think blah, blah, blah. And it's like, whatever. Okay. So that's fine that you disagree. But when you look at the greater context, geopolitically, economically, militaristically, strategically, all the different aspects of manufacture, transportation, energy crisis, the interconnectability of the entirety of the face of the earth. And then when you look at it prophetically, the only conclusion is that hyper convergent zenith. I know I've been talking about it for a long time. Guys have been talking about it a lot longer than I have that I've learned a lot from over the years. But I don't know. I just last night I was like, talking to my wife, I'm like, it's actually happening. Like I grabbed my computer like 10 o'clock at night, was like banging out notes, because I'm like, it's actually happening. Like the more data points I pull in, the more amount of information daily that comes out, it's undeniable, truly the lateness of the hour. And when I say prophetically, I'm saying as in some high degree of high degree of suspicion, for lack of a better word, given the totality of the evidence that we have a high propensity for actually being in the tribulation, early stages, super early stages, and there's a lot of different reasons why I would lean that way. Again, it doesn't mean that I'm right. It doesn't mean that that's dogma, right? That the tribulation has been initiated. But when you pull in all the different points, it's hard to argue against it, and we can look at it from, a domestic side of the house all the way to an international, all the way to a space, and then you can go technocratic and technological and technomancy, and then you can break into all the different aspects of even the more enigmatic and the more nasty stuff, like with the Epstein revelations, and then the transhumanism and hybridization of the human genome, which is occurring in real time. So, and then within the context of all this is all being bound together by this hyper spiritualism breaking out over the face of the earth with both a Christ consciousness, but not just a Christ consciousness as in, we'll say New Age, Gaia-based worship, Buddha, Shintoism intermixed with all these other isms, intermixed with even a galactic federation, evolutionary process of the species, UAP, disclosure based. And I know that's a long stringing thing of words because it is all interconnected, but you overlay that Christ consciousness type of hyper spiritualism breaking out along with what can only be described as hedonism. And hedonism isn't an act. A lot of people think like, oh, that person is hedonistic. Hedonism is not an act of perversity or just outright open like insatiable carnality, but it is actually religious. It's a religion, and it has religious origins and overtones, and there's very particular ruling deities and principalities that are the heads of those types of different religious movements. So again, I know that's a mouthful and I'm just fire hosing all over the place, but it's that big arc, right? That big macro perspective, 60,000 foot view of the reality of what's going on, and it's hard to deny. And the nuance of it is from Iran, and we can get into that and what's going on in Iran, and then what that looks like in both the macro and the micro, and in the short term and in the long term, as things truly progress up there. Because what's happened in Iran hasn't happened in a vacuum, and in fact, it hasn't happened under Trump's watch. It has been initiated under Trump's watch, but the listeners need to know and understand is he's walking out a continuity of agenda. By the way, this is not unique to Trump. He was just hand selected, if people were paying attention, to be the war president. I said that prior to his second election, that he 100% is the choice for the central planners and the ruling elite, or whatever language you want to give to that ilk of people, because he has the persona, right, and the personality and the character attributes to lead with strength the United States of America into what can only be described as the final world war, to terraform the earth for the arrival of the Antichrist. I said that before I got elected. Just so, I mean, people can go back, they can read transcripts, they can do whatever. And I said, and that's why these are who his appointees will be. I was saying he's going to appoint this person, he's going to appoint that person, he's going to appoint this person, he's going to appoint that person. Why? Because it's sexy, because it's trying to remobilize the American youth, as well as terraform, or for lack of a better word, psychologically terraform the collective conscious of the United States of America for World War III. Like, that's why, like, from a Bongino to a Patel to a Gabbard to a Hegseth to whatever, all these different appointees, and showing them three grunting and crossfitting and doing cool guy stuff. And it's a complete repudiation pendulum swing from what we had experienced under the last administration, with hyper effeminate, perverse, culture, family destroying agendas. And I said, that is intentional. So you will clamor for the pendulum swing back. And when the pendulum swings back with the next president, this was before Trump said he was going to run. And I'm like, when the pendulum swings back after this Biden administration, this is to sear the consciousness of the American citizen, to have literally a repulsion, like a vomit in their mouth about the depths of all this LGBT and BLM and Antifa and the transgenderism and all this horrific stuff, the economies, our geopolitics, the shame, the humiliation on the national sphere, the complete evisceration of our economy. And I go, this is intentional. So when the counter move comes into place, everybody will applaud it as if it's the second coming of Jesus Christ. And a lot of people literally did applaud it as if it was the second coming of Jesus Christ with the MAGA movement. And I go, and that is for the singularity of World War III. That's why. And why World War III? Because of Apophis, because of the asteroid that's coming. They have to have it. So as we see things marching out right now within the Middle East, and it's not unique to the Middle East, this is World War III. There's declarations of wars, and there's pseudo declarations of wars between nation states all over the face of the earth. The European conflict is at the worst it's ever been. It was released last night. It is the worst it's ever been, the tensions between the U.S. and Russia. Now, think of Cold War. Think of the Bay of Pigs. Think of all, like, Cuban Missile Crisis. And they're saying it's 200% worse than it ever was at the peak of that, when they were doing duck and cover commercials and teaching kids how to brace for nuclear war. And they were selling underground bunkers en masse at that time in the mid 50s into the early 60s, right? And they're saying it's way worse than that. You know, you have Pakistan declaring war in Afghanistan. You have India and Pakistan declaring pseudo war on one another. Those are nuclear powers. You have China getting ready to move on Japan and Taiwan and other Asia Pacific based nations nations that are typically have had long held alliances for the U.S. Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Hungary, Germany, the UK, France, the Netherlands, not quite Sweden, but definitely Finland and Norway. The Balkan states, right? You have like Kosovo and Bosnia and Slovakia and the Czech Republic. They're all involved in open warfare with the superpower of Russia, backed by China and Iran. And now we're doing the same thing in the Middle East. All the Western centric, superpowers going against, again, China and Iran in the Middle East and creating this global energy crisis. And so it truly is a World War III. But where it goes from here is what people need to be paying attention to. So I'll stop there and take a breath.
I think where it goes from here, right? When we're looking at Matthew 24, right? And these are the birth pains that take place, and you see the abomination of desolation. Then you see the sign in the heavens, where Christ is coming for his return. When you're looking at these political spectrums, right, left, red, blue, it ultimately goes back to a very ancient system. And I believe it goes back to a Babylonian system. And what I see politically at the government level, what's going on here, the author of it is the prince, the power of the air, right? Like Satan. He has some sort of dominion in this realm. But what he's doing with government is he's split the ideologies into masculine and feminine. Liberals would be considered on the feminine side, because when you look at all the characteristics and the things that they push for and they believe in, it falls under kind of like the goddess, right, of the false godhead. And then on the conservative side of things, you see that falls under more of the masculine things. But I think this ultimately plays out a big play between the relationship of the mother goddess and the child. And I think that's what's getting set up. I think the harlot is coming. I think that there's a lot of groundwork that's been done for that. But it seems like you said from the beginning of the show, there's like a spirituality, a movement that ultimately is Gnostic, that is just spreading, almost like how the gospel spread, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think like we're coming into those times where kingdom will rise against kingdom. And in that whole process, through the pestilences and the wars and all of this, it seems like that could be the coalition, maybe is a good word for it, of the 10 kings to come together.
That's interesting. That's exactly what I had as the end state of what comes out of what's going on in Iran. And to your point, with regards to the supernatural aspects of it, for the listeners, if you're not familiar with, especially in the high level occultic practitioners within the mystery schools, mystery religions, Canaanitic based, you can go Babylonian, Sumerian, whatever, Egyptological, but at the end of the day, it's Canaanitic, right? It's in its origins. And there's obviously preceding generations of lawlessness with the Akkadians and all these other different groups. But at the end of the day, it is all Canaanitic in its origin. And it's intentionally matriarchal in its aspects because it's an offense against the holy God, the Ancient of Days, Yahweh Elohim, and his Christ, Jesus. And that's why it's matriarchal. So it doesn't matter if you look into any of the different competing religions, apart from the Abrahamic religions, it is always matriarchal based. And even within the UFO community, within ufology and all the different whistleblowers like a Bledsoe or a Barber or whatever that are these experiencers of different high level, what they would consider like higher frequency light beings that are getting ready to assist humanity. It's always matriarchal in nature. One of the most significant perversions of the gospel came through the lens of Catholicism, with the repudiation of the patriarchy and, again, the exaltation of the matriarchy, the Queen of Heaven, which, by the way, is listed all throughout the Old Testament.
Yeah, Daniel 11:38, I think, shows
they're
that.
Constantly talking about the Queen of Heaven. And actually, one of the reasons why God judged Israel is it said, because your wives are baking cakes to the Queen of Heaven and the husbands know and do nothing about it. So because of their weak leadership. So a lot of it, and then it gets into your Asherah and your Ashtaroth posts, and even the days of Gideon, that's what it was centered on, and blah, blah, blah. And, it even gets into our modern lexicon with regards to Columbia and the District of Columbia and the Statue of Columbia, which is literally called the statue of Isis, which is Inanna, which is Ishtar, which is Ishtarte, which is Easter, which is Astaroth, right? It's all this etymology of these different feminine aspect, deities. And that is actually a strategic deception by the powers of darkness, because the powers of darkness are only ever masculine as well, too. So they only insert these doctrines, it's secret doctrines of demons, right, in order to perfectly pervert and corrupt the human species, or the human psyche, sorry, not species. And so that's why even this, the advent of feminism did not happen in a box. Neither did the sexual revolution, along with the counterculture drug revolution and the feminist movement within, again, late 50s and in the early 60s. That actually all was fabricated. It is not organic, from a think tank called the Tavistock Institute out of England. And they fabricated, how do we destroy, because they came to the conclusion that Western culture, in particular the United States, could never be taken down because of the strength of its patriarchy and the nuclear family with Judeo-Christian values as its core. Doesn't mean they're in the faith, but as a core doctrine of the nation, it's Judeo-Christian, right? That was their findings from think tanks right after World War II, right after the Nazis, right after Operation Paperclip, right after Operation High Jump, right after Werner von Braun and the initiation of JPL, and right after all they start doing all their Babylon working ceremonies. And this is all the time when all these different high-level hyper-occultists were rising within the scientific community, as well as the central planners of the United States of America, out from the city of London in England, whose chief deities, by the way, are Gog and Magog. If people don't know that, the Lord Mayor Parade every year celebrates the effigies of Gog and Magog, the giant Celtic Druidic child sacrificing, child eating gods of the British Isles. Still, it is the longest standing parade and celebration on the face of the earth. Nobody knows that. Is the Lord Mayor Parade and the celebration of Gog and Magog out from the city of London. Okay, that shouldn't be lost on people in the context of this, the wings of an eagle being plucked from a lion and being put over here. Like, there's a reason why the U.S. operates the way we do. It goes back to Druidic origins and stuff like that. I digress.
Yeah. Now you talked about the things going on in Iran and what's taking place over there, and that would affect for the United States, a huge part of the infrastructure, our energy system, and also just how we travel. What are your thoughts? Do you think this would bring what's that? I think it's the third seal, could be wrong, where, there's the balances, and it's pretty much talking about an economic collapse, a lot of stress on the economy.
Yeah, it's actually going to bring in all of it, and that was the point I wanted to eventually get to, was the reality of what we're looking at here is what are, euphemistically called the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. I don't like that language. It's too clickbaity, but it's about the first four seals, in particular, the 2, 3, and 4 seals that we see setting the stage for that shared collective conscious traumatic experience over the face of the earth to pave the way for what will be the repudiation of the old order of things, and the clamoring and the insistency and the crying out for a new order of things. And we know what that new order is going to look like within the context of the beast system, right? And the Antichrist and the with peace and prosperity, peace and security, restoring the fallout of what is the inevitability of what's going on in Iran. And what's important to know about it in Iran is you can't look at it from a geopolitical perspective. You have to look at it strictly from a prophetic biblical worldview, as well as a prophetic biblical supernatural worldview. Because what we have here is we have the convergence of the Prince of Persia. We have the convergence of Gog, of the Magogians, along with the convergence of the dragon from the Far East, along with the convergence of what's biblically referred to as the spirit of Babylon. It doesn't necessarily refer to it as a particular ruling principality, but the chief principalities of Babylon was Marduk, which is very fascinating because that was Obama's chief deity, was the worship of Marduk, and stuff like that within the context of the United States of America. So we are actually looking at a prophetic supernatural war breaking out, but I don't want people to get lost in the sauce on that, because it has real-time ramifications that are going to not just affect Wall Street, but they're going to be felt on Main Street, which means you and I, because this is actually, there's an intentionality, like I was saying earlier, of a continuity of agenda for the restructuring of the global order, secondary to, they're coining it like a lockdown 2.0, but it's going to be way worse than that. But it is a complete restructuring because of energy crisis. So what most people don't understand is when they hear about, an oil refinery or a pipeline or LNG, pipeline or a processing plant or shipping lanes or whatever being shut down, the only thing that they consider, sadly, is how much gas is going to cost per gallon. And that would be an extreme folly to think that it has to do, like, the effects are how much it's going to cost you to travel to and from work. When we talk about energy inputs, energy outputs, this is energy input output for every single detail aspect of your life. Your shampoo, to your soap, to your food, to the packaging on your food, to the rubber on your tires, to the seals at the manufacturing plant that have to be replaced every single day at these different major manufacturing plants, to the lubricants for your skid steers and your excavators and your hydraulic fluids that make everything run, to your cargo ships, to your trains, to your trucks, and to everything else in between. To the ability to transport goods and cargoes and actually produce those goods and cargoes to push out all over the face of the earth. And the number one thing that most people don't consider is the agricultural ramifications. And that is 100%, in my opinion, why they're doing what they're doing and where they're taking us. Is where this goes. It goes in 3 stages. It goes from the red horse, which is, World War III, global war. The rider on the horse is given a sword to go forth and take peace from the earth, going forth and slaughter. And then as that occurs, which is occurring in real time all over the face of the earth, everywhere on the face of the earth. And then that rolls right into global hyperinflationary economy, where we're told the black horse rides out with the scales, and and alluding to the hyperinflationary nature of the global economy as a day's wages for a loaf of bread. And then within that hyperinflationary economy, because you have a reductionism of both supply lines as well as an increase in energy inputs and outputs. So you have a hyperinflationary nature of all currencies on the globe at the same time. And then within that, you get the famine, because food production now globally, corporately, is only done through energy inputs. It's the food output, right? The edible caloric food output is only based on the energy input, and not energy just in, the manufacturing and the energy need for electricity, coal fire plants, nuclear power plants, whatever it is, to power the plants that are making the combines, making the tractors, making the whatever, doing the seeds. I'm from Iowa, Illinois, right? So big. I'm actually from Moline, Illinois, which is home of John Deere. So my whole reality was always, farming and farm implement stuff like that. That's just kind of the world I grew up in. And,
if it ain't green, don't buy it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Oh, dang, you're driving a red one? Yeah. Green versus red, right? Case IH versus John Deere everywhere. But
yeah.
The ag input output is where all this is going, and not just within the United States of America, but globally. And secondary to just the functional thing, again, we got to think bigger, because the reality is fertilizer, and all fertilizer is specifically a byproduct of energy inputs, and more specifically LNG. So liquid natural gas, as well as natural gas, is part of the process for extracting different aspects of hydrogen. Michael Yon does an unbelievable job talking about anything with regards to famine. The guy is a stud and super knowledgeable. Go follow him wherever you can, and you'll learn a lot. But these energy input outputs through the natural gas, as well as different extracted components within the fossil fuels, which are used for fertilizers. What most people don't realize is the vast majority of the world, especially in the West, but everywhere as well too, China, and even the breadbasket of Ukraine, it should be lost on you what they're doing in Ukraine, and why the Biden administration gave the Ukrainians depleted uranium rounds, specifically knowing that it would toxify the breadbasket of all of Europe with radiological isotopes to render it unusable. That was strategic. It's also strategic why they got rid of our oil reserves. Or not got rid of them, but drew them down to the degree that we can't recover. It's also very strategic why they sent all of our anti-tank missiles over there and left nothing to protect the homeland, as well as leaving $80 billion worth of U.S. armaments in Afghanistan during the withdrawal. Like, there's so many connection points that people lose because of the daily ticker is so filled with new news that they're not able to see where all this is going. This is also relevant to why the U.S., the United States of America, to our own allies blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which was specifically pumping gas, not just for the normal energy needs of Europe, but in particular for BASF, which is the #1 fertilizer producer for the face of the earth in Germany. And we blew up their pipeline so they can't produce fertilizer, and they shut down, and then we destroy the breadbasket over here. Then now we hit the Middle East and we destroy that over there. Then you burn down 1 million acres in Nebraska of grazing land, and then you burn down the hog processing plants, and then you burn down the chicken processing plants, then you burn down the egg plants, and then you insert a Monsanto, and then you have GMO-based seeds that have no resiliency, and then you sequester this, and then you geoengineer the water over here, and then you hyper dump water over here, and then this is all strategic, and it's not happening here. It's the whole face of the earth, and the driver of it is the singularity of the United States of America. So that's why I say there's a continuity of agenda. The agenda is the Great Reset. That is the agenda. The war in Iran has nothing to do with nuclear weapons. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, came out several weeks before they started doing their mass propaganda campaign and said there is no evidence that Iran has a nuclear weapon or even has a desire to pursue nuclear weapons. She gives a public press conference 3 weeks later, like, Iran has nuclear weapons. We got to attack them right now. I mean, they're literally lying right to our faces. Yeah. And the whole thing is to set the stage through global traumatic experience onto a global war, onto an energy crisis, onto a lockdown 2.0, onto a mass depopulation campaign, onto a global hyperinflationary economy so that they can reset it and replace it with a digital biometric-based blockchain digital currency in order, and at the same time as all this is going on, you have this overlay of mass famine, global famine. A quarter of the world's population is killed by that fourth horse that rides, that chloros horse, the green horse that rides. A quarter of the world's population will suffer from that. And by the way, within the context of historicity, war, famine, and pestilence are the triune, the unholy trinity. They always go together. And by the way, that is not unique to history. That is biblical. The Lord says it over and over and over. The sword, famine, and disease. The sword, famine, and disease. These three things will come against the nation. The sword, famine, and disease. He's constantly, these are the three tools by which God uses to exact divine judgment over the face of the earth. So humans may think they're in control and they have sovereignty, but ultimately the Lord's let them walk in that out. So it's interesting that at the same time, as we have all this breaking out on the face of the earth, we also have new reports coming out about the cicada, variation mutated virus of SARS-CoV-2 that is sweeping the world in droves that people can't understand. And it may require another round. Oh, and your vaccination isn't going to stop it. And if you've had COVID before, it's not going to stop it because now it's a new mutation. So it's going to lay waste the human population. And it's interesting that they call it cicada, a cicada virus that's going to sweep over the face of the earth because the only other name for a cicada is a locust, right? So it's like, here you have this biblical context going boom, 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 marching out all at the same time. They are overlaid all at the exact same time because it is taking us somewhere. And from the central, so you have competing perspectives. So you have the central planners, the global elite, the Luciferians, whatever. You have their agenda, their perspective. They think they're in control. They're not, right? Like, can calamity come upon a nation unless the Lord decrees it? No. That's a facetious question from God to humanity saying, no, obviously I'm in I have total sovereignty at all times and dominion at all times. They're only carrying out what I'm allowing them to carry out. So you have that faction walking out what they want to walk out to get what they want to get to. But then you have even competing interests within these principality-based governments, right? You have the Prince of Persia, and then you have Gog, and then you have the Great Dragon, and then you have the Spirit of Babylon. And then you have all these other lesser principalities, all these other nations. So there's competing interests, right? Like a house divided can't stand, on what their ultimate agenda is. And then we have the Lord's supreme overarching sovereignty over all things, where he knows exactly where he's taking it with regards to the aspects of how the inhabitants of the earth will not only be judged, but also creation itself, right? Creation itself is going to groan. The earth is going to split asunder. The earth is going to stagger on its axis, right? Like a drunkard, sway like a hut in the wind. You know, earthquakes, the likes of which has never been seen, different astronomical events, atmospheric events, water events, mega water events, and mega fire events, and everything else in between. And so it's actually, there's a thread that pulls all these things together and to give us a reality of truly how late the hour is, because this thing with Iran is not going to be some long-term thing. It's just not. We don't have the time. Prophetically, biblically, we don't have the time. It's a very narrow window that all these different things have to transpire. But one of the primary aspects for why on that Luciferian side of the house and where they're trying to take us to is because of the Astro-catastrophism. I've been talking about it for several years. Tom Horn and many other people, and even secular humanist academics and astrophysicists have been talking about it for many years as well too, about Apophis and all the effects of Apophis. And so they need a global consolidation. They need to restrict all movement. They need to consolidate all supply chains. They need to restrict all forms of mobility. They actually need to restrict or censor all forms of communication based on social media. So war gives you an aspect for that. They also need to mobilize all their central planners in our reality, be like FEMA, DHS, Asia, assets. That's one of the reasons why they're federalizing all these troops and they're pushing out ICE everywhere to all the major urban centers. They've also mobilized National Guard Quick Reaction Force in the last 3 months, a standing quick reaction force. And it's also why they use the guise of the immigration crisis to pre-position troops and assets outside of all the major urban centers. I said it a year ago. They're doing this because of World War III, and they're doing World War III because of Apophis, right? Like there's a congruency to what's going on here, why they're making these moves. They also need to consolidate governance as well too. So when we see what's going on in Iran, what the short-term effects will be after the fallout of Iran, which isn't going to take very long to have all this come into place, will be what you mentioned, Stephen, is that restructuring under the guise of 10 kingdoms, 10 regional superpowers that have mutual defense agreements, mutual alliance agreements, mutual economic agreements to restabilize the world after the fallout of this war and its resultant global energy crisis that has seared the mind of the whole face of the earth. Economic collapse and famine, and all supply chains and all manufacturing, all ag at the exact same time everywhere on the face of the earth. Then now you have the perfection of softening tactics over the collective consciousness of humanity to bring about your pre-planned solution, which will be this dividing into these super states of these 10 kingdoms to restabilize the economy, to create universal basic incomes, to make sure that there's equity on the face of the earth, and to make sure that everybody has a basic caloric allotment of food per day based out from these 10 regional super states to restore peace and security. That's where all that comes in.
Yeah. Now, just to kind of bring some context to with Apophis, right? Well, this goes back to throughout all the mythologies. There's always like this warrior god versus this like evil god, right? You know, Marduk versus Tiamat, for example. And when they're naming these asteroids, Apophis or Apophis was at war with, I think, was Ra. I think it
Yeah,
was.
it was Raw.
Ra.
Yep.
Okay, so it's the same characters at war here, and it's almost like they're symbolizing this meteorite, which could come and cause catastrophe on the Earth. Right? It's almost like in their mind, in the Gnostic perspective, that's the demiurge. But the demiurge is coming here, so they got to like speed up this process. They got to establish this one world order, this Unitarianism, theosophy, bringing everything together. I think the foundation of what we're talking about is a new system, right? And, they tried to get to that new system with climate change and propaganda and that whole thing, and it didn't work, right? They had tried to do it with another step, right? With pestilence, right? Back in 2020 and all this. But it seems like they're gonna use, like you said, right? They're gonna use war, famine, and pestilences to do this, to transfer the energy grid that we have now, right? Into a whole new system that I think the 10 kings will come up with this. And ultimately, I think like the harlot is the queen bee, you know, running it all. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it's hard to know who that is, and people will be like, "So who's the harlot?" And it's like, is it the United States? I don't know. Is it the Vatican? I doubt it. A lot of people always go to the Vatican because that's kind of historical dispensationalism, but they don't have the same efficacy of ability to carry out their power structure that they did in the 1400s and 1500s. That's not the way it's transferred into more of an underground capacity within the mystery schools, and especially with the West being the center of that, with this merging of Roman and Egyptological, pantheon deities, which is what the U.S. is founded on. Look on the back of your dollar bill; it's Roman and Egyptological deities merged together, and this new Atlantean experiment that the West was. That I have a high index of suspicion that even the harlot could be, for lack of a better word, the United States of America, because every single aspect of the United States of America is feminine. It's feminine. It's again, not to rehash it, but it's this feminine aspect of matriarchal of Columbia and the Statue of Liberty and the blah 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 and the District of Columbia and all. It's hyper feminine deity worship, particularly, and including when you think about the rise of all manner of matriarchal based perversities are all born out from the United States of America, from the porn industry to the sexual perversions to the LGBT plus to the feminism. I mean, we have literally made the whole world drunk with our immoralities based out from that singularity of spiritual authority in high places dictating the spirit of the nation of America. And then from there we export it. And that doesn't even include the abortion agenda along with the global ritualistic child sex trafficking and sacrifice, which U.S. is number one, and every single level of the most wickedness on the face of the earth, the U.S. is number one. You can't deny that. You can't debate. You can try. It's not going to work. Data is data. We just are. And so it's interesting, too, when you look at with the Antichrist coming into power, is that harlot who rides the beast is only useful for a short time. So the harlot is actually exploited. And at the end of the day, it's lay-wasted. And if you remember that lay station, I don't even know if that's a word. I just made it up. It sounded cool though, right? That's all that matters. But that lay wasting occurs from the harlot. The very next chapter is Revelation 18, which is the destruction of Mystery Babylon, right? Who says, I sit as queen, I will never be a widow. So again, even that spirit of Babylon identifies itself as the chief matriarchal aspect over the face of the earth, even in there. So it goes from the harlot to Mystery Babylon, the destruction of Mystery Babylon and the destruction of global trade that makes them wealthy, that creates economic collapse all over the face of the earth. So it's like you see the same thing playing out over and over and over again in scriptures. And again, that's why what's happened in Iran cannot be lost on people. I mean, I got reports. I have friends that are still active in the Marine Corps. So I was told this. I'm not in the Marine Corps. I can't tell you definitively, But what I was told yesterday was that the Marine Corps the entire Marine Corps has been mobilized for war. You know, they just changed the draft or the enlistment age to 42 in the U.S. Army. They've played around with the language within the Selective Service Program, which is the draft. Don't forget that they changed the Department of Defense to the Department of War. And then they just had the strangest meeting in the history of the U.S. military by bringing all the different theater commander general staff to meet in person with Pete Hegseth, the Department of War. Don't forget that they've changed the language. They have legislated it in the last year and a half in ways most people aren't aware of. And they've also increased our budget to $1 trillion, the most ever on the face of the earth. In fact, every nation in the world in the last 12 months has all upped their military budgets by more than 28 to 38% is kind of the national or the nation state average. That is insane. That means everybody knew what was coming. Everybody's in agreement with what's coming, and it's an all skate. Everybody's going to be a part of what's coming next. So it's a really big deal.
It really is, man. I mean, the harlot is a huge deal. She sits on many waters, 10
Many
kings,
waters.
7
Yeah.
hills. When I look at that, when I look at the harlot, I see that as Lucifer. Now, Lucifer could be involved in all of it, right? But you've got a few characters here. You've got, right, the angel with the key to the bottomless pit, Apollo, right, who has arrows, which we could maybe make another connection with the rider on the white horse that has a bow, right? The crown on his head has been a resemblance, tracking the goddess throughout time.
Well, what's interesting is the man of perdition in 2 Thessalonians 2, that and I may mess this up, so somebody can make some minor corrections, but I'm not trying to lead anybody astray on this. But the etymology of what is historically translated as man of perdition in our original context actually says just straight up Apollo. It just straight up says Apollo. And the Hebraic translations, I don't know if it's from the Qumran Dead Sea Scrolls, but that, like, the Antichrist is literally listed as Apollo. And again, that shouldn't be lost on anybody either, because that's Trump's personal chief deity is Apollo.
I agree with that. I agree.
He has frescoes of Apollo in his penthouse suite. He has bust of Apollo. He actually sees himself as Apollo. One of the attributes of Apollo was that he was known for his golden wispy hair. I kid you not. He was known as, you can go to your mythos, right? Apollo was known for his ability to make contracts and negotiate deals among the other gods and the nations at a level that nobody had seen before. And he was also known as the god who staved off pandemics. That's what he was known for. So think Operation Warp Speed.
Right? Like, he's got an Apollo painting on the ceiling, on the roof of his penthouse, right, in New York City. And that painting is called Apollo led by Aurora.
Yes.
The divine feminine goddess, right? The mother figure.
And even on the back of our dollar bill, that Annuit Coeptus comes from the Cumaean Civil prophecy, right? Like, you have the oracles of Delphi, the oracles or whatever. The Cumaean Civil is considered the most important of the prophetic sibyls or oracles of the ancient world. And so that phraseology, both Novus Ordo Seclorum and Annuit Coeptus on the back of your dollar bill, is speaking about the return of Saturn's reign and Apollo returning to the earth to usher in the golden age of the gods. Now, who do we know who uses the word golden age? Every chance he gets.
Yeah.
So
what about, if you know anything about the Kalki, mention that too, because the Kalki in Hinduism comes.
I don't know that. Yeah, explain that one to me.
All right, so I'll screen share this here because this is interesting. I threw this up on X, and if anyone wants to come see some of the research I'm getting into, I am throwing it up on X all the time. Okay, so we got the screen.
Yeah,
up
I don't
here.
know a lot about Hinduism.
So okay, here's the Kalki. All right.
Well, interesting.
To the
rider on a white horse. There you go.
Exactly. Now the sword, the sword right here, this is for people that are looking here on YouTube or wherever you're at. You can see that the Kalki has a crown, riding a white horse with a sword. Okay. But Apollo, how this transitioned into another culture, was that he has a bow, arrows.
But with no arrows. Yeah.
But check this out here too. Let me see if I can, let me pull, where is it? Okay, bookmarks. So this right here, let me pause that so it's not playing. This is the Abraham Accords coin. And what do we see? It's the same sword that the Kalki is coming in and swinging. It's known as a scimitar sword in the Arabic regions, but this again, this symbolism is all kind of connecting, and then you have the Star of Ishtar right here at the base of it. So again, just Christian conspiracy stuff, man.
It's hard. It's like we can't even call it conspiracy anymore. It's just information, right? It's just and a lot of the language I use all the time is it's informed speculation because that's biblical. Biblically, we only operate off from informed speculation. It says we see in part, we know in part, we look through a glass dimly. Like one day we'll know in full. So when we are operating in the realm of prophecy, it is informed speculation, and that's what the scholars and the academics at Christ's first advent were doing. They're like, it says this, it says that, but we're not quite sure exactly how it's going to play out. But we have a rough construct for being able to rightly identify. And by the way, all the ones who received Christ were the Essenes. And by the way, the Essenes are the one who predicted the end of the age of grace was mid 2025 was the end of the age of grace and the beginning of the final Jubilee. So according to the Essenes, who were the ones that rightly, John the Baptist was an Essene, Zechariah was an Essene. They say a lot when it says, and they believed on him, and many of the leaders believed on him, that they were all Essenes because they knew exactly what they were looking at because they had stuck to the scriptures. The Pharisees and scribes, or the Pharisees and the Sadducees, had created an offshoot and diverged from the authentic scriptures, and they actually were the ones that changed the dates and times, which is why they missed it all. So again, this come full circle to the Antichrist, who does the same thing. So that's where you get that divergence. The Essenes held strictly to God's biblical calendar. They would not taint it at all, and they knew the day he was going to show up. They knew when he was going to show up. They knew the day he was going to die before Christ's first advent. They had 100% accuracy, and every prophetic point about Christ's first advent. And then they gave some of their thoughts on Christ's second advent, in particular with regards to the eons or aeons and the onas and the shmitas and your jubilees, right? All these cyclical natures within Hebraic calendar based stuff, that the end of the age of grace would be mid 2025, and that would begin the final Jubilee, meaning that everything with regards to all the tribulation and all the things preceding the tribulation and all the things clean up post tribulation for the millennial reign of Christ would have to occur between 2025 and 2075. That's what the Essenes said. It has to occur. But then when they looked at it historically, every big move of God, this is, again, according to the Essenes, this isn't according to Jamie, this is according to the Essenes, because there's so many trollers out there, right, that'll say all kinds of terrible things.
They're going to troll me for this shirt.
Yeah, they will. They'll go, oh, so you celebrate death? And it's like, no, I conquered death, bro. Like, whatever. Anyways, so they say that Christ, or the moves of God, always occurred typically within the first several years of these transitions of age, right? Age of chaos, age of Torah, age of grace, and then millennial reign. There's your 7,000 year, panoramic of human history. So when we're looking at Apophis, and then you back up 3.5 years to the T, from the date that the science says Apophis is going to have its effect on the earth. And Apophis, by many scholarly accounts, not to say there aren't debates, but the majority of scholarly accounts, Apophis wormwood is the midpoint of the tribulation. Okay, back up 3.5 years from when the science says Apophis is coming. That puts you at mid 2025. I am of the informed speculation that we have entered into what is historically called the tribulation period. I believe that we're actually in it. Now within that context, look what's broken out. Look what's broken out since 6 months ago. Look what's broken out over the face of the earth, and look how quickly all the dominoes will be put in place just prior to Apophis in about 3 years from now.
Wow, man. No, I mean, again, like the Holy Spirit's doing backflips with what's going on, right? Like God is, you know, going and say his spirit is out and he's saving people, and what I see is just like there is the wide, broad road fighting against what God's doing right now. And what
Oh
I mean by
man,
that is that
absolutely.
you've got these doctrines and these seducing doctrines of devils that are out there. People, and this is the thing, this is how it's really catching a lot of people. And this is how the psyops working. And ultimately, I think Satan is the god of psyops, right? It's a little bit of truth, will you in, but ultimately it's a lie. And you're seeing that with people going on very big platforms, people that are pushing the same information about the war that we would be talking about, right? So these people are coming and they're acting like ministers of light in
Yep.
the social media world. But ultimately a lot of them, and I've put these people are like in the scope, man. Because I'm seeing their fruits, and their fruits are pushing a Gnostic Christ consciousness religion.
100%. And not just in the secular humanist pundit, academic world or even the news speak world, but it's within the Christian truther movement as well too. I've been talking about it a lot lately on shows, is the neo-Gnosticism within a lot of so-called or self-dubbed Christian truthers, especially in the UFO UAP space. And they are wittingly or unwittingly, who knows, but they are teaching a Christ consciousness. I mean, and again, it goes into that Gnosticism where they're so lost in the sauce on their own hubris that they can't just become like a child. And unless you become like one of these childs, you can have no inheritance in the kingdom of heaven. That's how distinctly anti-Gnostic the Lord God Almighty and his Christ Jesus are. There, because so it's like, no, you deconstruct your humanistic secularism and your academia and your scholarship, and you actually walk by faith. And unless you become like a child, which means you have to deconstruct your Gnosticism that's been forced on you in this world, you can have no inheritance. And so we're at a point now where a lot of these different people, even within the Christian truther sphere, are teaching allegories and metaphors and storytelling, and Genesis is just an allegory. Genesis is just well, guess what? That's what theosophy teaches. That's what Mormonism teaches. That's what Islam teaches. That's what New Age and Gaia, they all support Christ. All of them venerate Christ. People don't understand that. Every single one of these pagan religions venerates Christ, because Christ to them is just, it's a level of ascension. It's not a chief attribute. It's not Christ. It's not Lord of Lords, King of Kings. It's Christ of a Christ, Christ among other Christ. Jesus is highly venerated among the adepts in the mystery school religions, and they specifically teach that the account of Genesis, in particular the garden and all the different curse and the fall and blah, this good versus evil, right? This duality of energies and lights and stuff like that. Yes, the Bible is all true, but that's just one version of it. And there's all these other versions of it. And Jesus is just one version of an ascended master who achieved higher light frequency ascension through whatever, through Gnosticism. And if you think about the insertion of Gnosticism, it came in the garden. Gnosticism is the direct temptation of the serpent was to take Adam and Eve, who were so childlike. I'm not saying they weren't hyper supernatural superior beings to us in every way. We're in complete genetic entropy all the time. I can't imagine how beautiful they were and how whatever they really were.
It's like ignorance and innocence.
Yes.
Like a child.
They were child, which is why they had no shame of even being naked. Look at a little kid running like dude, they will sprint through your living room naked while you're hosting a dinner and be like,
They're just
like,
ripping their diaper off,
because they're secure, and they have no knowledge of these different constructs that they should. And so, anyways, I could talk about it forever. But Lucifer himself, other than Nakash, it's not actually Lucifer. I get that. All the people that they're going to do all their little micro corrections, right? We speak in generalities for brevity's sake, but I know it was Hasatan, a Nakash, a winged fiery plume serpent in the garden. Wasn't Lucifer himself, but it was to insert Gnosticism. And remember, it wasn't just the tree of the knowledge of evil. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Both good and evil. It's just knowledge knowledge for knowledge's sake. It was knowledge in general. It was the enticement, right? The seduction was to Eve, and through the weakness of the leadership of Adam, to have a higher level of self-proclaimed ascension and understanding and knowledge, so that she could be more like God. And it's the same old thing that's been going on forever. And unfortunately, right now, in the Christian truther movement, I caution about this all the time, that we can't have the neo-Babylonian blindness towards the secret doctrines of demons, bringing the way of truth into disrepute and inserting a new Gnosticism. Because what's happening even within our ilk is everybody is always learning constantly within this sphere. I mean, we have access to information and data and understanding and history and emerging technologies and blah. We have access to information in ways we could have never imagined. That's prophetic fulfillment from Daniel. Like, check that box to the lateness of the hour. But yet, we're never able to come to an understanding of the truth. Why? Because it's not knowledge so that we can grow in the Lord, so that we can die to self, live for Christ, be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. It's knowledge for knowledge's sake, so that we can self-exalt, we can self-justify, we can self-righteous, we can self-esteem, and we can pit ourselves or compare ourselves and compared to the next guy. It's literally satanic. It's satanic in all of its origins. I just preached on it yesterday. The sermon will come out on whatever, Wednesday night or Thursday morning or whatever, but specifically breaking down all the modus operandi of Satan and the powers of darkness, like going through all the scriptures and how they operate and what they do. This is what they do. It's super simple.
Yeah.
Super simple.
Yeah, I've had some. I've been, meditating on the scriptures. I've been asking God to reveal things to me, things that I'm seeking, and really, it's ultimately to kind of get a view of what is this new world order of Gnosticism going to look like? Who are the ministers appearing to be light, but ultimately work for the darkness? What are they saying? And UFO disclosure is going to be a big part of this movement, because the people that are involved in the UFO disclosure, they're involved in many backgrounds, but some of these backgrounds come from Scientology, some of it comes from Urantism, some of it comes from Gnosticism, but ultimately what they all have, what they all share in similarity is that there is a matriarchy part of this God, and it's involved in the UAP disclosure. You'll see J2 Psionic Asset talking on interviews that the lady has everything to do with disclosure. You'll see Chris Bledsoe, who's been talking about this for 16 or more years, probably 20 something years, but he's talking about that, he had an interaction with an abduction phenomenon, right? And then now he's having, not now, but in the past, he's had an interaction with the lady. He claims that it's Hathor, Isis, goes by many different names, which we see identifying the harlot, right?
Yeah.
And
by the way, real quick on that, Stephen, just for the listeners, he has been saying for a very long time, this is Chris Bledsoe, that it would occur in April of 2026 when Iran and Israel are exchanging missiles for one another. That's what this feminine matriarchal DD showed to him. And he said, in fact, in particular, what he saw was an entire global energy shift on Easter Sunday of 2026. That's this week. He's been saying that for over a decade publicly. This is before Iran and Israel even remotely had any. He said, and then that's when the orbs are going to show up, and that's when the UFO is going to show up, and that's when this woman is going to help usher us into a higher frequency consciousness and help with the evolutionary process of the species after this major war between Israel in the West and Iran. Sound familiar? I mean, it's like I'm saying, you can't make this stuff up. And I don't know if you know, Stephen, I just got back from a brief with guys that were, they're in these teams or these task force or whatever with the Grushes and the Bloodshows and the Greers and the Elizondos and the whatever. Like, I just came from a brief, had to fly out there, meet with them for like 3 days to be read into all this stuff. And this is what they were saying is what they're getting ready to do next, you can't even comprehend. And actually, part of the Iran war, I believe there is going to be a limited nuclear exchange, because if the listeners aren't aware of this or not, the U.S. is getting handled over there. We are getting worked in a way that our media will never let you know. So our casualties are about 3x beyond what they're reporting. Our assets being hit are 3x beyond what they're reporting, and our complete strategic hamstringing is about 10x beyond what they're reporting. We are getting worked in ways we can't even understand. So why that's dangerous is because of ego and the egotheism within this administration and this apotheosizing that Trump is very fixated on, which goes back to Apollo and all that, right? And his triumphal arch that he wants to build, this arch of Titus that Trump wants to build, all that has to do with apotheosizing, or self-proclaiming that you are of a deity, that you have some deification attributes within you. If people didn't know that, that's what's going on with Trump all the time. Every language that he says, but that they're going to take it to a limited nuclear exchange. That's where I'm going with why this matters. And every ufologist, UAP, and every whistleblower, and every experiencer, and even the government conclusions as they pull in the metadata for all things UAP and WOO, is that they are going to show up after we use nuclear weapons on one another. Isn't that interesting timing?
Yeah, yeah. And you know what's wild too, man, when I'm digging into the mythologies, specifically the Egyptian mythology with Isis, Osiris, Isis, Horus. Horus would be like the Christ, right? Isis would be the mother of the Trinity, and Osiris would technically be the hidden one. And what's funny is that Bledsoe, in his experience, says that the lady says that there is one that's greater, but he's hidden. Now, where I'm getting at with this is that the lady, Sophia, Hathor, Isis, Frigga, Ishtar, Ashtaroth, whatever you want to call her, a big part of the plays that she makes within this Trinity is that she raises the spirit of Osiris from the underworld into Horus. And so when we see the Antichrist take the one of the heads, right, that was wounded fatally, is again, or something, right? I'm kind of like just paraphrasing the scripture. It even gets into like Revelation 17, where, it says that there's 7 kings, 5 were, the 6th is, the 7th is to come, but then there's an 8th right after that. Like immediately in between the 7 and the 8, something happens there. But that's where I think this Gnostic religion is going to come into play.
Well, not only that, I know you're aware of this, Stephen, but just for the listeners' sake, to know and understand, the ancient origins and the occultic origins of the United States of America in particular, is that every inauguration, including the inauguration of George Washington, the Scottish Rite Freemasons, which are actually the descendants of the Knights Templar, so do a deep dive into the Templars and what they believe. Oh my goodness. You should go watch the Y Files. Man, I can't believe I can't think of his name. I love his work. A great researcher. Even if they're not believers, it doesn't mean they can't be great researchers. But he did a show with, Timothy Hogan, who is the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. You want to know what they believe and what all the ruling elite of the world believe? Go watch the episode on the Y Files with Timothy Hogan, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. That's so eloquently laid out. It would be so enticing for somebody who doesn't have the Holy Spirit of living God to lean into these things. So these Templars, which are, the Bavarian Illuminists, which then are the Freemasons, and then you get the Scottish Rite variation of the Freemasons, right? They have been performing the raising of Osiris ceremony at the inauguration of every single president since George Washington in the District of Columbia, outside the womb of Isis, Semiramis, Ishtar, across from the phallus of Nimrod, which is Apollo, which is Osiris, which is whatever, right? Like all this etymology. And every single president, and there's a reason why it's called an inauguration. An augur is an ancient occultic seer who the next ruler would be approved by the gods, by the pantheon of the gods of old, to have the divine right of the gods to rule and reign, to usher in the golden age of the gods. They're called augurs, and they would do an inauguration at the Capitolium of Jupiter, who is Lucifer. Capitol Hill only comes from one place, the Temple of Jupiter, which is Lucifer, which is Zeus, which is whatever, like at Capitolium Hill. So we have Capitolium Hill in the womb of Semiramis under the fresco of the Apotheosis of Washington, where Trump moved his inauguration from indoors underneath of that to do his inauguration, as down the street they're performing the Rising of Osiris ceremony, waiting for the day that it will be reconstituted, or the hidden one will come back onto the scene to rule and reign humanity and usher in the golden age of the gods. Listen, there's not a single word that this administration says that misses my ears. I hear it all, and I get it. Most people don't understand what he's saying. They're like, oh, whatever, you're just anti-Trump. You have Trump derangement syndrome. And it's like, no, I have
discernment,
a biblical worldview, and I have spiritual discernment by a holy God. It has nothing to do, like, I'm not a national republicist or whatever I am. I'm a monarchist. I believe a king in a kingdom that will never be shaken. And the king's name is Jesus, and he is the Christ, the singularity of the Christ, and he's also my savior, and he's also my friend. And everything was made for him and through him and unto him. That's what I believe in. So that's my chief instate of what my nationalist, I am a nationalist. I have a kingdom, I have an origin, and I have a sovereign that all my devotion goes to that and that alone. So yeah, I am a nationalist,
Right.
But most people don't understand that. So as you're saying, this aspect of this hidden one that even Bledsoe is talking about with regards to his, enigmatic UAP, NHI experiences, is they're all saying the same exact thing at the same exact time with the same exact window of timing for these things to break out. So again, cannot stress enough the lateness of the hour. Yeah. And even nothing is happening in a vacuum. Iran and China and Russia and Ukraine and the U.S. and the economy and Palantir coming online and Space Force and Starlink and Star Force and this, like, you can't separate any of it. It's all symbiotic, and it's all taking us somewhere. And I don't think most people have the stomach for what the aftermath looks like within the next, 6 months to 18 months. I don't think they have the stomach for what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and the one thing too with Bledsoe, he's saying that when the Sphinx, around this time of Easter, right, like you said, 2026, the dates may be moving around because it's all a mystery anyway. It's all mystery religion, in my opinion. But the Sphinx will be gazing at the east. And when you look at the mythologies, man, when I say mythologies, it's counterfeit.
Right.
Its source is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay. The truth is the tree of life. There's two theologies that only split the world. There's only two. But he says that the Sphinx will be gazing at the east, and he'll be looking at the constellation Leo. He doesn't say that part, but I researched that part. He says that the star of Regulus, when it goes from, when it turns red, this is when a new knowledge will be brought upon mankind.
Yep.
The star isn't red, it's blue. So when it turns red, this is the significance of the sign. Now, to the mythologies, and, even in Zoroastrianism, they believe...
Which is Iran, by the way.
Which is Iran.
Iran. And by the way, the Iranians are the Aryans. Anytime you hear Aryan in the Aryan race, those are the Persians. They are called Indo-Aryans. And in fact, in all anthropology, they don't ever refer to them as Iranians or Persians. They are the Aryan race. And in fact, the Nazis sent their leadership in the early 30s to study under the Aryans through Persia and Iran up into Nepal and to the Himalayan mountains under Buddhism to develop their construct for Thelema and their Thule society to bring about the rebirth of the Aryan race. It all went through Iran. So that shouldn't be lost on people either.
Oh, it's wild too. And with Zoroastrianism, and the point really I'm trying to make is that the counterfeit, with all of this, and in Zoroastrianism, which is a part of all of this counterfeit mystery religion, they worship a god, Ahura Mazda. And Ahura Mazda means wise lord. and he comes in from his sign, and him coming comes in from the east. We see in the Bible what stars represented on the horizon just before the sun rises. Venus, right? Again, this is all tying back into the divine feminine. This is all tying back into some sort of wisdom that's going to be brought upon mankind. And ultimately, with everything that we've talked about so far on this show, awesome show, by the way, people go like it. Um, it's a Tower of Babel moment. It's the
Absolutely.
Luciferian doctrine. It is the reverse Reformation. It is to bring everything back home to this false mother god, and to just the theosophical movement. Everything's gonna come to one, and
Yes.
they're gonna build a tower. They're gonna try and build some sort of technology, which I think the tower can contribute to the queen bee symbolism, and why bees were always affiliated with the divine feminine and all of this, because I think that Tower of Babel, wherever it'll be placed, wherever it'll be built, whatever it'll look like, its function will function like a queen to a colony. And so that, again, that's all very interesting. I've been digging into
Well,
just
that is interesting because as you're saying that, because I've never processed out what you were saying before, but it's interesting that the false prophet is the one who creates the image of the beast. So some centralized image, whether it's holographic projection or whatever it is, that is the object of worship. Is
Yes.
the image, the erected image of the beast. And it's whoever worships the beast and his image, that's who gets to operate in the public sphere.
And when we look at Genesis, right, it says a few interesting things there. It says, hey, first of all, the people came together under some sort of foundation. I think that foundation was a belief system. They came together. They said, hey, let's unite. And when they did that, they said, let's unite. Let's come under one language, lest we be brought back or be scattered like we were before. Scattered to me sounds like there was a bunch of different religions. There was a bunch of different perspectives and beliefs out there, but the people decided to reject that and to turn away from that and to come together. And when they came together, there's something very interesting. This is with the Tower of Babel, Nimrod kind of come into the story, but anything that they imagine to do, they will be able to do.
Yes. And,
which is
and
very
people
interesting.
miss that. Yeah. That's funny when people are like, they get really off on the flat earth stuff and NASA's a lie and there's just a firmament. Watch all the rockets bounce off of it. And there is no such thing as space. And we've never been to the moon and we've never been to outer space. I'm like, man, you couldn't reject the scriptures harder if you tried. Like, that's just trying to be a conspiracy theorist of conspiracy theorists, because biblically it says nothing would be impossible for them. Nothing would be impossible for them. It is math. It's just math. It's physics and it's chemistry. And, when you have the depths of knowledge of how these different things work and interact and stuff like that, you are able to actually do these things. I mean, look at what they've done genetically. Look at what they've done with hybridization and chimeric. I mean, we have white paper publications boasting about the viability of chimeras that have been coming out of Japan. Like, there's nothing that, then we think about the undersea bases. Then we have the deep underground military bases. Then we have, the physics for, maglev trains and anti-gravitical propulsion and mercury-based systems and different aspects of altering time space, not time travel. I don't believe we can do that, but I was read in specifically to the full competency longitudinally of teleportation. I was in that brief and I was specifically like, yes, we 100% have that capability. And it's not new. That's not a new capability. We have a duality of exposure to technology. We have what they use and what they have versus what we use and what we have. Like, our AI is not the AI that they're using, right? Like, our engineering and manufacturing, electrical engineering and all these different things and mechanical engineering is not the engineering that they're using. We all know that. There's a two-tier system within humanity. And so, yeah, it is like nothing would be impossible for them. Nothing. So when you look at a collective hive mind and counterfeit omniscience and omnipresence through technology, which we know with all certainty the beast system is going to have, and the ability to even like read thoughts or alter thoughts or monitor thoughts, they have that. That is not new technology. It's actually been around since the late 60s, early 70s that technology has been around. By the way, AI was developed in the late 60s. People think AI just came out within the last 10 years, like Silicon Valley started working on that. They were using AI in the late 60s.
Yeah, Marvin
You just
Minsky,
now are being read into it,
probably.
you know?
Yeah. Well, too, speaking on behalf of like the image of the beast, not on behalf, but to bring the conversation towards the image of the beast and all of this. When you look at the Epstein files, you get into it, which I spent way too much time digging into it, and I've separated myself from it. What I found interesting is that Epstein was connected to MIT. At MIT, he was good friends with Marvin Minsky. Marvin Minsky was the godfather of artificial intelligence. He established it in a university called AI Lab at MIT, but the department was called AI Lab. Now, Marvin Minsky is related to an ancient rabbi, 16th century time, called Rabbi Judo Low. When the folklore around him is that when he was being persecuted in that time, along with the other Jews, that he dug into Kabbalah, mysticism, Talmudism, all of that kind of stuff, and his plan was to create what was known as the Golem. And so he goes out to this is how the folklore goes. He goes out to the water, forms this golem out of clay, and gives it life. And when he gave it life, he put a seal on its forehead, where it kind of like programmed it to, serve Rabbi Low and whatever his needs and requests were.
Yeah, it was kind of like a cyborg, right? If I remember the mythos, it was like the first transhumanism, like the Internet of Bodies cyborg thing.
Dude.
Miry clay mixed with iron, right?
Yeah. So with that said, I have this like theory that Sophia, this divine feminine goddess, when you look at just physicists talking about the cosmos, it's only 4% of matter that we can see. The rest is dark matter. The rest is dark energy. Now, I don't know if that stuff there has anything to do with Genesis and Genesis 1 and 2, where you see like darkness and it's void and it's over the deep and he's hovering over the waters. I don't know. But what I know that the physicists are talking about is they're claiming that those parts of creation that they can't see, that don't react to light, but they know exist, is the womb of creation. And so that was a buzzword, because I know you can relate to that. There's just buzzwords popping up all over the place from people. I'm wondering if there's going to be some sort of merging between Sophia and science, but it'll be calculated and measured as dark energy, dark matter, where if we can manipulate these things, almost like how the alchemists were trying to do with the ether and the four elements of life, if they can alchemicalize that of some sort, can they does that serve as an alchemical change to artificial intelligence? Like you'll see in movies that they put these complex plasmas, specifically in Captain America movie, right? In the beginning of the movie, the Nazis are all there. They've got like this fusion energy in their weapons and stuff, and it runs everything. It almost runs everything similar to how like AI would with this concept. So what I'm saying is I'm wondering if there's something with all of that, with this hive mind system, with the divine feminine, with the image of the beast, with that great city Babylon that sits on 7 hills. I find it interesting that Jared Kushner, in his master plan, it's a very short presentation that he gave on it, only about 13 minutes long. I really encourage people to go watch it. But when he's talking about building Gaza, Gaza will be a part of the Greater Israel Project, which ultimately kind of resembles the same jurisdiction that ancient Babylon had over the state of Israel. So in Gaza, he wants to rebuild Gaza. He said it'll take 3.5 years. That's kind of like another buzzword term.
Yeah. And what's interesting about Gaza, too, to add another point, is that the Antichrist sets up his tents between the Great Sea and the Holy Mountain. That is the Gaza Strip. Yep. And then you have Kushner along with Trump saying they're going to build the most opulent palace on the face of the earth in the Gaza Strip within the next 3 years.
And it's got 7.
I'm telling the timing, like, And that's why I try to I know I fire hose, right? I know I pull in a lot of different ideas when I'm talking. I get that people get their panties all in a bunch about it, but I'm trying to paint this macro picture so you can't go, oh, nah, that's stupid. Oh, that's ridiculous. Because that's what everybody does, right? Oh, I watched Candace Owens and she said, which by the way, you shouldn't be watching it. But they have their little YouTube soundbitey things that they make a dogma based off of. And I'm like, no, you have to have the big picture. It's all converging right now in real time. Even this Gaza component, what's going on with Gaza and this Abrahamic Accord and this peace plan, and then the initiation of the war after the peace plan, because you're going to have a strengthening of the peace plan, and then the Palantir-based AI, pre-crime stuff, and there's your counterfeit omniscience and omnipresence over the face of the whole earth, and the amount of satellites putting up. I think they want to have right now. There's whatever there is, I can't remember. I had the data points on it. But anyways, they want to have 50,000 satellites up within the next 3 years. So then they have literally that whole net, the Fowler snare over their whole face of the earth. So they can be all present and they can be all knowing. Counterfeit, right? Counterfeit omniscience and omnipresence. So yeah, you see it all coming into play at the exact same time as you have the religious aspect overlaying with the technological, overlaying with the geopolitical, overlaying with the economical, and they all overlay at the exact same time.
Yeah. And what's crazy too is that Gaza state, right? That tabernacle that I agree with you 100%. It's got 7 residential regions in it, which could be the 7 mountains, the 7 hills. It's just a theory, right?
Yeah.
And it's so funny. I feel like Lucifer would build it there rather than build it where, the true millennial reign will happen.
Yeah.
Because I think that what's being established here is we're talking about a counterfeit millennial reign.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
When you see the harlot and she's decked out in precious jewels, metals, and all this kind of stuff, first of all, you see in Daniel 11:38 where the Antichrist honors the god of forces, that divine feminine goddess, with all of these things. It's like a transfer of power in some sort of way, but I think it also deals with the economy. I think those things deal with the economy. And when the beast and the 10 kings turn on the harlot, when that patriarchy overthrows that matriarchy, he takes those jewels and now he has the power of the economical system of the world.
Yeah.
It's kind of like he destroys the artificial intelligent queen bee hive mind thing that we may see from iRobot as Vicky,
right?
Takes it out and he's like, I'm the one and only true God.
Yep.
And then he comes in and he's like, now you have to take a mark that resembles my image and you can buy and sell because I own everything.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And here's on speaking on that, there's a point I just want to make real quick. And I know because a lot of people don't pick up on it, but there is not a unanimous affinity for the Antichrist. There is competition against him, and it's just he has the vast majority of humanity under his sway, but he has to make war. He has to fight against different competing interests. You have the king of the south and the king of the north and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people think there's this fullness of unity, but like you're saying, no, there's still war. There's battles, there's counter arguments and counter movements to what he's doing. He just has the majority, the masses of people, and obviously just because we think that it's just Christians who aren't going to receive the mark. No, I'm like, no, actually, I think the majority of Christians will take the mark, professing Christians. I think the libertarians are going to be the ones who will refuse the mark. I know way more libertarians that really have no affinity for the gospel or Christianity whatsoever, but yet they're more Christ-like in their perspectives and their awareness and their attunement to things than what most Christians are. And there's a lot of people that are so anti-government, anti-establishment, anti-totalitarianism and technocracy that it's not just Christians who are going to be beheaded for not taking the mark of the beast. It's just people in general who are beheaded for not taking the mark of the beast, but there are those who hold to the testimony of Jesus Christ that are beheaded as well too. So there's more going on with the context of how this plays out. And I think that's what's confusing people too, is one, classical dispensationalism, skewed versions of rapture doctrine, skewed versions of eschatology, where everybody is waiting for this big show, even skewed versions of the inundation of hyperfixation on the mythos and the genealogies and the Genesis 6 narrative, not reducing that. It's unbelievably prescient, but they make that the central theme. Like, when I see Nephilim on the earth again, because God says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. When I see Nephilim on the earth, then I'll know it's the end times. I'm like, actually, that's not at all what that verse says. Like, not even remotely the context of the verse. You hijacked multiple different thought processes because you're parroting what you've heard other people say, and that's not even the context of the verses. As the days of Noah and as the days of Lot, everything's normal until it's not. It doesn't say anything about Nephilim roaming the earth. It says that people are going to be oblivious to the signs of the time and to the lateness of the hour, and they're going to be oblivious to the discernment and attunement to the things of God. And they're going to be completely unrepentant and smug and self-contented in their heart posture. That's what it says. Just like the days of Noah, just like the days of Lot, eating and drinking and giving in marriage and all, it's going to look normal. So everybody's waiting for this big aha moment. They're waiting for Nephilim and giants on the earth. They're waiting for, I don't know, supernatural apparitions in the revelation of the mystery of Fatima to come back. They're waiting for mile wide UFOs to come hover over cities. They're waiting for transgenic monstrosities roaming the earth. They're waiting for all these other big picture signs, and they're waiting for a global collective unity. There is no such thing as a global collective unity. There is a global collective majority, but not a unity. Two totally different things. And so that's why I think a lot of the believers, as well-meaning as we may be, are actually missing truly what's happening and how late the hour actually is, because we have been pre-programmed to only wait for these big show signs. And I always go, what if none of that's true? Because they all miss Christ's first advent. They all miss Christ's first coming, because they thought they had a very specific way that they expected to see him come on the scene. And when he didn't meet that expectation, they rejected him and they cried out for another. What makes you think it's not going to be the same way at his second coming? Everybody has this pre-program, or not everybody, but the Christians who are in tune to this stuff have a pre-programmed, definitive, dogmatic expectation on how they think Christ should come and everything should play out with regards to the second coming of Christ. And then I go, but what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't meet your expectations? Are you going to reject what's actually happening and receive another? Because they did the first thing at it. His followers did it at his first coming.
Yes.
They were the scholars. They were the academics. They knew all eschatology. They knew all prophecy. They knew the origins of words. They knew the etymologies of words. They knew the Greek. They knew the Hebrew. They knew the whatever. They had it. Same thing now in the Christian Truther movement. We like digging and digging and digging and digging and digging. And what if we miss? What if we miss it too? It would be high hubris to think we couldn't. Because again, as I say all the time, it's the spirit of the age. It's not the spirit of those guys over there. So that means we're all equally susceptible to it, which is why an identity in Christ alone, a relationship with Christ alone, eating, hungering and thirsting for righteousness alone, seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness alone is the only thing that's going to sustain you. Because he's God and we're not. Like, are you willing to let God be sovereign and let him walk it out in a way that you never even perceived coming, and then have your hands so wide open in humility and meekness to just allow God to be God and not go, well, no, it has to happen this way. As it was in the days of Noah, right? Like, or it has to be Project Bluebeam, or it has to be this, or it has to be that. I'm like, who told you that? Who told you it has to be that way? The Lord didn't say. In fact, he said the complete polar opposite. He said the polar opposite of all that. He said it will come upon you suddenly while you're unaware, not once you see holograms and humanoid robots and transgenic hybrids and galactic federation show up on the scene. He said while you're unaware, that's when it's going to happen. When you least expected, that's when it's going to happen. As it was in the days of Noah, as the days of, and what, like, it's going to be semi-normal. You're not even going to know that it's happening. He goes, then it's done. It's literally just done. And so I go, man, we gotta stick to the scriptures with a childlike faith, not with a neo-Gnosticism based scholarship. We gotta reduce our understanding, you know.
No, I mean, very well said, man. So we got about like 15 minutes, man. I really wanted to get into this topic with you. We're gonna circle back around to psionics, UFOs, Jake Barber, which I've investigated all of those things. And you know, the whole story with Jake Barber is that he was a helicopter pilot. He picked up a egg-shaped, you know, craft that he claims was landed there by another a military psionics team. This is when he was ignorant to all of this stuff. But the experience he had in the whole timeline of flying there when he was 20 miles out, he got this experience, and now the experience has stuck with him till this day, like a spirit. And he claims that it could have been a few things. Could have been an entity inside the craft communicating with him, giving him this experience, or it could have been the actual craft itself in a way to where like the craft is artificial intelligence. It's at this point of enlightenment where, yeah, it might have went to from a state of humanity and then evolutionized into how to live forever, which is the constant rebranding of Osiris, regeneration, on and on and on. Um, what is your view on with all that? Because it expresses a divine feminine connection with
Yeah,
UAPs
I
and all
actually
that
have
stuff.
I have a big opinion on that because, you know, like I said, I just got back from the briefing out in Tennessee, and then I met up with some other guys out here in Colorado. And Barber is a part of all this stuff. And I met with another guy who's permission. I don't have permission to use his name publicly, so I won't. But he said I can share anything. You would know it if I said it. He's out there on the whistleblower circuit as well too, and also, you know, doing the Sean Ryan shows and Tucker Carlson and all that. So you would know it. So I met with him in person as well too, and he was a psionic with Barber on those contracts. So I'm saying this from primary source, not from hearsay or not because I studied anything else. And by the way, this guy has recently come out of high-level occultism, in particular Freemasonry, that he was involved in as he got pulled into these different psionic-based programs, and is now a believer in Jesus Christ. And what's interesting is as soon as he surrendered his life to his Christ, he said it was like the veil was pulled off and he saw everything for the demonic infiltration and subterfuge that it was instantly. So super cool, super powerful testimony. Anyways,
That's the Holy Spirit right there, man.
yeah, it's
That's
so
it.
cool. Yeah. And again, so he's doing the dog whistling. He is a psionic. He was trained in psionic. He went through, you know, he do the lucid dreaming and the astral projection into the, you know, the mind altering substances, the transcendental meditation. I mean, he went through all of it in order to hone in this psionic nature. And then okay, so here's the conclusion. I'll give you the conclusion, the Cliff Notes version. Their psionic dog whistling capabilities, they're basically, you know, they have like this gate program or program where it's the program for gifted and talented. Greer does this, whatever, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind or whatever, where it basically think of, what's it called? Not the Avengers, whatever, the X-Men, right? You have your Dr. Xavier, and then you have your school for the gifted, and then you exploit these different giftings. So they said one of the reasons for the immigration and the whatever, and even a lot of the losses in the national parks, this is what I was briefed on, is because they're actually pulling in kids to this gifted and talented programs where they're developing this extrasensory perception and stuff like that. But what they were telling me was that it is all directly related to altered states of consciousness for pineal gland takeover by the powers of darkness, 100%. So they said, so then they take these individuals that are actually trained in these things or identify these things, or they're multi-generational families that have been identified to have these particular extrasensory perception capabilities to be able to interact with these craft. And then what they realize is that it's all government and private sector technology, and they are being used as a giant psyop against their will. But it's all real, but it's not real. It's all real. What they're experiencing is real. What they think they're a part of is real. From their perspective,
Illusion.
It's a delusion. It is a deception, and they are being worked into it to propagate a higher level deception that you can't even understand. And as these psionics are dog whistling in the craft, you know what they told me specifically? These are the guys that are on mission doing this. They were actually, unbeknownst to them, the private sector is a runaway, not a breakaway civilization like people use, but they've come out from under government oversight. They're completely rogue in their technological advancements. And what they're doing is they're actually using electromagnetic and ELF waveforms and whatever, all the super duper scalar wave tech stuff to draw in adversarial craft, basically hijack adversarial craft, so China, Russia in particular, and draw them in, and then they land them or crash them, kind of like a tractor beam, right? We see all this in movies. They lock it on with a tractor beam, they pull it in, then the crash retrieval is their reverse engineering adversarial craft that are coming into our different airspaces and over our site sensitive things. And yet these other guys, which they are really practicing occultic things, and they really are tapping into things they shouldn't be tapping into, but they themselves are deceived as if they are telepathically, psychologically connecting with these craft to draw them in. And they didn't know that there's private sector entities that are there with them that are actually locking onto this craft, landing them so they can reverse engineer them. So that's what I was just read into, is that it's 90 plus percent, not quite 100%, 90 plus percent, every single thing with regards to both UFOs, UAPs, and NIH are ours, theirs, are private sector. 90 plus percent. But they said there is a very small percentages that they cannot account for. However, and I'll give this qualifier, of the 90 plus percent that are ours, theirs, or private sector, 100% of the technology that is being used is powers of darkness origin. It's of a powers of darkness origin, and it's all through altered states of consciousness. Every single aspect of it is from an altered state of consciousness. Right. And it even makes me think of like Graham Hancock, and he has this Peruvian DMT shamanistic practitioner. And what he said is all UFOs are simply vehicles for entering and leaving spiritual realms and parallel dimensions, but they're only technological in origins. They are man-made, but the technology is not of, or it is supernatural, multidimensional. But
right, it was probably taken from the astral realm, where they go and they conversate with these things that are NHI. That's where the term NHI got brought into this.
It's math. It's math. And here's what's interesting, circling back around to Epstein, because I hadn't heard that aspect of Epstein, but in these briefing, Epstein was brought up as well too, because contained within the Epstein file is his high level propensity and his dark underworld networking capabilities for advanced propulsion technology. Okay, so now this takes us somewhere with regards to the ritualistic sacrifice, ritualistic abuse, and even the blood and the cannibalistic nature of what's contained within the Epstein files. It was reciprocity. I mean, I was told that from government officials, both special forces and, special access programs heads, said that within the Epstein files, what their conclusions was there is a reciprocity somehow, and they're starting to connect the dots of the spirituality of all this, that he is trading blood and children for advanced tech. And he is the conduit for the advanced tech for the ruling elite in the private sector all over the face of the world. He's the fixer. And in order to be the fixer, the currency of that dark economy was blood and children. And then they get the math. Then they get the tech. Then they get the physics. Then they get the understanding. And by the way, has it not been that way all throughout human history? Blood for info. Children for info. Death for info. That's what it's always been centered on. You do this, we'll give you, because you got to remember these celestial hosts, the fallen ones, right? The fallen angel realm, these guys have a superiority of knowledge and understanding of the cosmos and math and physics and superstring theory and quantum realm and all that in ways we don't even understand. And they are willing to trade info for offending God. That's all they want. You offend God, and we will come and share with you. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's L. Ron Hubbard or if it's Wernher von Braun. It doesn't matter if it's Descartes, philosophers, science, academia, tech, propulsion, rocketry. All of them say the exact same thing. They channeled, in altered states of consciousness, they channeled the information. Oppenheimer says it. All of them say it. The understanding of physics for nuclear fission and nuclear fusion came through altered states of consciousness and occultic practices. Read Oppenheimer's personal letters. They all talk about it.
Another big player too is just Andrija Puharich, who's the guy who really kind of maybe founded ESP, extrasensory perception. He was known to go over into the Eastern mystic area there and getting involved with shamans and stuff, practicing ESP. And really, ESP to me is like in the Scientology world, it's where you put yourself in this clear state, which Barbara actually talked about, and that you lower your intellect, you increase your intuition. And the more you do this, it's kind of like follows in suit with Jung and or Carl Jung, and where he talks about axiom of Maria, which is interesting because that process, right, of alchemy and consciousness was on the blackboard of Epstein's library.
Yeah.
And he also had dark brain connected to it, which is another fascinating thing. And then in between that, like maybe the thing that makes both of them work is called like time delay, which is like it's a conscious term where the subconscious is separate from the conscious, which is why when we see things in films, we don't pick them up right away, but subconsciously our brain stores this information.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think there's a connection with the whole conversation with what you just talked about with the idea of dark brain, which connects to another theory that I'm putting together here because it all connects. It's just the strings are loose with dark energy and dark matter and this cosmos consciousness, you know, that they worship in some sort of way, which then connects to the lady and Sophia.
And that's why, you know, for the listeners to understand is when they do what they're getting ready to do, as far as the great deception, not just a deception, a great deception, is their technological capabilities and their understanding of neurology and sociology and anthropology and physics and sciences and propulsion and energy waveforms and synaptic and even hormone release and physiology within the different constructs of the body. These guys, they're operating at levels technologically and scientifically and understanding that you so cannot comprehend or understand, that it will seem otherworldly and it will seem supernatural. So what Barber experienced and what Bledsoe experienced and what I was read into in this briefing, I was read into the depth of the technology that's able to do that. It's just straight technology. And I believe it. So I try to make this because I'm not sure if I'm communicating it correctly. So it's not supernatural. What they experience is not supernatural. It's technological. But the technology is supernatural. Does that make sense? I'm not sure. I'm like, because people go, oh, he's saying that as well. And I'm like, no, understand the context of what I'm saying. What they experience is fabricated through technology. So it looks spiritual, but it's not as technological. But the technology to make it look spiritual came through the spiritual window. So it's this perverse feedback loop on how we're getting there. So now what they can do is they can scale it up. And that's what people don't understand, is they can scale up and actually create a collective psychosis, collective trauma, or collective euphoria, or collective anger, rage, or collective screen memories. So a lot of these abductee experiences, they said, is actually the private sector, which is why like a Burleson or a Burchett or a Luna or whatever, they're trying to bring this stuff back under oversight under the government, because the private sector, in particular Northrop Grumman, is out of control. They said they're so out of control. And so even a lot of these horrific, traumatic things that abductees within the abductee world are experiencing, they said the vast majority of it is the private sector doing it to people. because it's just like the Nazis did and just like the Japanese did on the Chinese. They're doing human-based horrific experimentations, typically around genetics and reproductive things, which is what every abductee experiences. But their technology is so advanced that they can give you screen memories as if it was the insectoids or the reptilians or the Greys or the Nordics or whatever that were doing it. They are imprinting those. Wow. So, because then it propagates another layer of deception and plausible deniability. But they're physically doing it. They are human beings that are doing it. There are human beings that are doing these horrible things. And again, that gets into the global child trafficking aspect of it. It's all interconnected, even the abductee phenomenon, because in this psionics and this gate programs, and then you have your disaster capitalists that go into every disaster area and they snatch up all these disenfranchised children and they put them into either this level of stuff with scientific experimentation, or they do it in the black market for the different sex industries or labor industries that generate income that supports the tech industry. It's all being done in real time, and that's why most people can't comprehend what they're actually for one, they can't comprehend that level of evil, but two, they also can't comprehend that level of technological advancement. It is that far beyond our capability to understand that when they loose it on humanity, it will be a great signs and wonders that serve the lie, even calling down fire from the heavens. Most people don't understand what they're able to do with plasma-based technology, ELF waveform, extremely low frequency waveforms, what HARP really does and what they're able to do with weather modifications and geoengineering and ionospheric-based things, like some of these fireballs from the sky aren't fireballs. They're not meteors and it's not space junk. They're fabricated, and then they're monitoring the social media reaction through AI-based algorithmic, competencies. So again, I could talk about this stuff forever because I'm want to shake the world, especially the Christian truther movement, and going, they've gone so deep in the woo that they can't deal with things at a, like Occam's razor. Like the most simple answer is the answer. It's humanity. It's human beings inspired by the powers of darkness to walk out what they're walking out. And it's so far beyond our ability to comprehend that when they loose the real stuff on people, they will attribute it to supernaturalism, and it's not. But it is. But it's not.
Right. But it's not. I totally get it. Yeah, I totally get what you're. I'm picking up what you're putting down, brother, man. Dude, what a awesome show, man. Dude, thank you for coming on. I have so much respect for you, and I love the hard work that you put into this. I love the passion. And some people might be like, "Oh, these guys, maybe we're talking over each other." It's like, nah, dude. This is what happens when we start talking to people that understand, like what we're getting into.
Your knowledge on the mythos, occultic side, I'm like, I'm learning. Like, oh, dude, I didn't know that. I'm like, yeah, like everybody comes and brings a piece of the pie. We all bring pieces together, and that's why it's good to dialogue. And it's like, and just for the listeners, I know Stephen wouldn't say this, and I wouldn't say this is it and there is no other. I have it figured out. I go, dude, I'm open-handed. This is just my understanding today. And as the Lord reveals more, as the Holy Spirit reveals more, as I mature in the faith, as I mature in the word, as things actually happen in real time around the world or with governments or announcements, then we have to go, okay, I got to shift this way. Okay, yes. Like I was leaning this way. Now, in light of new information, I lean that way. I was wrong. It doesn't mean that I was wrong. It was just undereducated or underinformed. Or again, we do the best with what we understand today and allow the Holy Spirit to direct our steps, not going, this is and there is no other. Whenever somebody speaks with a dogma like that, well, you better watch out, because they're building their platform based on that dogma, and they will be unwilling to move. This is why we have doctrines and denominations, right? Because people are unwilling to move and be humble or meek enough to go, yeah, man, yeah. I used to believe this way. Now I believe this way. It's like, I used to be pre-trib rapture. Now I'm like not rapture. I used to be not rapture. Now, as I learn more, I actually do subscribe more to pre-trib rapture. And they go, that's fine. It wasn't nefarious or misleading or false teaching or false representation or false anything. It's actually due diligence. We're doing our due diligence to operate in the fear of the Lord to the best of our ability to allow the Lord to direct our steps and to strengthen and equip the saints for these things that are breaking out on the scene.
Amen, brother. And really, the biggest calling for you, me, for any Christian that's listening, anybody that is involved, engaging on social media, whatever, using your voice. You could even just talk to someone on the sidewalk. It's about getting the gospel out there. It's about getting the true gospel out there. There's so many false gospels and seducing spirits out there that are really blanketing and pulling everybody into a source that is evil. But brother, thank you, man, so much. Where can the folks support you and everything that you do?
Yeah, they can find me just under Jamie Walden on YouTube, and I have a landing page at omegadynamics.org. I also have a book available on Amazon called Omega Dynamics: Equipping a Warrior Class of Christians for the Days Ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll be sure to list everything in the description below, man. And this was an awesome conversation. I really hate to cut it short, but we've been here for an hour and 50 minutes, man. It was a lot of fun, dude.
We're gonna lose the listeners. They'll be like, "Wow, these guys talk forever." It's like, "Yeah, we do
That's
talk
all
forever."
right.
So,
Come back,
yeah.
revisit. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. And again, I consider you a friend, and we're on the battlefield together.
Yeah, bro. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on. Go get some rest. I know what it's like coming off shift. I don't miss those days. I do not miss those days,
Yeah.
dude.
No, well, I heard it, and what's crazy is, God put it on my heart to start this show, and God's been sharpening me as I've gone, and I'm not the same person as I was when I started the show. And what's going on is, God is blessing this show, and I'm trying to stay as in line as I can with scripture and everything that I get into. And I'm ultimately trying to really share the gospel out there. And I'm trying to do this and
Amen.
do that. But if at some point I can do this and God could bless me and my family financially off of this, I'm good leaving the fire department or whatever. It
Yeah.
just depends how long I've been there, which
Yeah.
that may be the issue. I
Well,
might have to
now
stay.
your battalion chief just heard you say that. And he's like, "Oh, is that right? Stephen's going to try to leave, huh? Okay."
They love me. They'd hate to lose me, but no. With all boasting aside, and yeah, that's that, man. But thank you, Jamie. I appreciate you, folks.
Yeah,
Be
thanks,
sure
bro. I
to
appreciate you having me on.
yeah, be sure to check out all his stuff, and all the links will be in the description below. Brother, I thank you again, man. I know I said that a few times, but we're gonna get ready to move into the next segment. God bless you and your journey. Hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Talk to you later.
All right, biblical hitmen breakdown debrief. Oh my gosh, it's been so long since I've been one of those. I've done one of those. I forgot what to call it. But Jamie Walden, what's up with my hair too? Man, okay. So I took a break after that main part of the segment of the show. Came back, I'm all flustered here. But Jamie Walden, brother, thank you for coming back on. It is always a pleasure having him on. It's high speed, it's high energy, and we're covering a lot of material. There's so much laid out on the table, and it all connects at the end of the day. I thought, I'm digging into this fascinating uh, part of Scripture, Revelation 17, the harlot, the 10 kings, the 7 hills, mountains. Some may interpret that as, um, and 8 kings, right? There's 5 that were, 1 is, right, which is the 6th. The 7th is yet to come. But then, like, there's the like the son of perdition, the 8th. Very interesting stuff. This is going to be talked about on another show that I do with By Their Fruits podcast. Hopefully, those guys will make the live because there's life we're living here. But there's so much to the harlot, and really, what I've been doing with Revelation 17 is as I'm reading it, I'm drawing it out. I'm trying to draw it out to where it makes sense. So, really, the harlot is like this source of everything else, and she's a great city, and she sits on many waters, which is nations, tongues, languages, all basically say many peoples, right? Like people all over the world, right? All of them, the kings, everyone is fornicating, right? They're fornicating with the harlot. And what's interesting is the harlot could represent all of these things where you have, she's decked out in precious stones, right? She's got you could compare that to like a monetary system, right? Because at the end of the day, our currencies, the wages that we use to buy and sell things, go back to some sort of wealth. And that's why you've got the movement going on around the world where you've got you've got all the countries kind of fighting for natural elements of the world that represent value: gold, silver, all kinds of other things, right? There's diamonds, this, that these things hold, they're tangible items. And so when the harlot is decked out in these things, it can only make me think that this is has to do with power of wealth, almost. Again, the whole world is connected to this kind of system. There's a religious aspect of the harlot. That's where we get into the goddess worship, we get into the lady, the Gnosticism, all this kind of stuff, try to expose that material to Christians. And we got into what I'm most fascinated with, right? Probably because of the generation I was born in, when these things started popping off on the internet, uh, is the UFO, UAP, non-human intelligent narrative agenda. All of this, how does it get mixed in with the pagan trinity, the counterfeit? Like, how does it get mixed in with Lucifer, Satan, the devil, and his plan? And ultimately, I think that's where we see in the harlot. That's where we see this Gnostic religion, right? Gary Wayne's been on the show, calls it a new world order of Gnosticism, and the lady is venerated, right? Very similar to how we could even see in just different religions around the world, right? A lot of the divine feminine worship today has not reached, well, it's on surface level, so you really can't get a good idea of what its life source is, and so how you can discern it and pick it up in reality. But the more you dig into it, you explore it, you become like your own historian, and you start researching these things. You start researching the trends, and you start seeing the language that's behind it. Then you start to understand that language. But again, no, it's there right in front of us. You're gonna have theosophy, the movement of theosophy, right? Which is just changed names. That's the interesting thing about this mystery religion. It has many names. New Age, which now I think it's like the NAR movement, which I think the NAR movement wants to be the leader of the theosophy movement, where all the religions come together and they become one, and they serve a god, right? And what's interesting? Daniel 11:38 references to the Antichrist serving the god of forces. Maybe not serving, right? But honors the god of forces. There's some sort of, you know, it's like the Katy Perry music video, where Katy Perry is imitating ISIS. She's decked out in all of the clothing of what they would wear back then. She's venerated as Isis. There's pyramids in the background. It's wild. There's lions at her side, right? That's crazy. And the people of the world were serving her with precious stones and all of this stuff. And so we know the beast is connected to the 10 kings. We know that the beast in 17, Revelation 17, talks about that the beast turns on the harlot in some way. And I think that that's where I see the same trend in the mythologies. Whereas there's this constant going back, there's this duality uh, throughout the whole timeline of different cultures switching from patriarchy to matriarchy, patriarchy to matriarchy. And that's what and what I think about both of those is that they at some point become one together, like like rebus, or the idea of that they're not distinct from one another. Now their energies have come together. And ultimately I think the child that the goddess delivers is the one that you know just has those characteristics. But what's fascinating about Revelation 17, and where I'm getting at with the harlot, where she's in control of everything, but then she also has the world serving her, and like in a way like bowing down or connected to this system, and the people are they're lower in the chain of rank of, so they don't have that superiority to where they're probably led into this system to believe, like they're led into this system thinking that they will be like gods, but they won't. um and and so I look, it's like in the movie iRobot, right? Vicky is the main source of the artificial intelligence. She's like the supreme being, the deity over all of the other robots. And it's a feminine name, right? And in the movie, she's personified as a lady, right? How she sounds and all this kind of stuff. And so, what if artificial intelligence at some point, then at some point you get the UAP phenomenon, then you get this non-human intelligence, false Elohim saviors coming into the play, and they're connected to the divine feminine. At some point, like that could all of that right there could be established and work together to function as something that humanity would worship. And I think that that's possible, and what could be a part of the Gaza project, right? Like, it could be a part of what's happening with the Greater Israel project. What's fascinating about Daniel chapter 11 is when you get to verse 45, I think it is, towards the end. Um, it's like just before the end, and it's talking about the location of where this Antichrist figure is going to establish his estate, his palace, his tabernacle, right? And from previous shows, I've talked about how the goddess has been connected to the being the god of forces and being protection, serving as protection, around a kingdom that this king reigns in. And again, I think we see that in Revelation 17, where the 10 kings and the 7 heads, they're all a part of the harlot, but it's just that the 10 kings turn against the harlot because it's all God, right? God is in control of everything, and he puts it on the beast's heart to turn against this system, almost like as if the Antichrist turns on the surveillance state technocratic uh, hive mind that becomes an artificial super intelligence and is conscious and is claiming to be like this feminine figure, that we see circulated with the Bledsoes and all of this. And again, it just fits with the New World Order of Gnosticism. There's I can go on for a whole another 2 hours talking about this topic, because originally, I think it started in the garden, and in the garden you have right there, right in front of you, you can see illustrated from what I've been saying for forever, that there's this counterfeit and I'm just going to start labeling all of this stuff that we're exposing as the counterfeit. And when you look in the garden, you have the tree of life, and you see that there's another tree that's present in the garden, and that tree is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And that is the counterfeit of the tree of life. The tree of life is the narrow road. It is truth. It is Jesus Christ. The true Holy Spirit, God the Father, right? And then in the counterfeit, that's where you see uh that's where you see this false Trinity Godhead that's trying to mimic, imposter, imitate, invert, on and on and on the truth. So I'll leave it at that. And I'd love to get into this topic, deeper. Let me know what you feel about the end of the show here, and let me know how you feel about, all of the show, because Jamie came in, he rocked it, and he always does, right? It's always a mic drop with him, and I love it. Be sure to go support him on his platforms and all that stuff. Check it out. Also, be sure to support the Biblical Hitmen. We're now on Patreon. You could find the podcast over there, patreon.com/the biblical hitmen. Come check it out. If you want to support the show, that is the best way to do it. And I just got it up and rolling. You'll be able to get these episodes a little earlier than I'm going to drop them publicly. Um, and check out the show. Check out the show on audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, wherever you can consume all your stuff. That's where the show is going to be. Also, for Patreon members, I do want to listen. I just got into the game. I'm going to start, trying to come up with cool stuff is exclusive to Patreon members. So, but again, hey, listen, if you're on the platforms and you're getting through the ads, that is another way to support the show, and I appreciate you. And I got love for you, for y'all. I see people enjoying the show and listening to the show, and I'm really just trying to do the best I can. I'm trying to get the gospel of Jesus Christ out there, and as like that flag says behind me, like God's working hardcore, right? With Romans 1:16, you could see it right there. Being not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power of our salvation, and we need to share it with others. So thank you for listening. I hope everyone has a blessed day wherever you are, night, whatever. I'm going to see you next time. See you later.